think about what we can do with many people. That is really the heart of the future. So, and today the key theme is around creativity and innovation. There's many, many disparate forms of how we can tap many people to create value. But one of the most central ones is around the best and the best of what we can be, of who we are. So this future of creativity and innovation is enabled by one primary thing, as that is the fact that we are connected today. And that has given birth to what we can think of as the global brain, where the people on the planet are as the neurons in the brain. And this is an old idea. In fact, the ancient Greeks used to have this idea of a global brain where we can think collectively. We can have a collective consciousness even. But it's only since we've become connected that that has become a reality. So when I wrote my book, Living Networks, in 2002, it was about this idea of the living networks and the global brain. And many of the things I've described is what we now call crowdsourcing. Things like incentive, bringing together ideas around the world, or bounty quests, bringing together insights around the patent landscape. So we didn't have the words at the time, but that is if we look at the true implications of connectivity, it is being able to create something which is truly beyond ourselves. That is the potential, that is the aspiration. And imagine if an individual can have that potential, what can we do collectively when we bring that all together? So I just want to quickly run through just a few themes and thinking about what this means, the future of creativity and innovation. I think we want to start by looking at what it is to be human. Go on to look at just a couple of the ideas of what crowds are. Think about what creativity is. Go on to look at structure. And this is really the important part. What are the structures by which we can create creativity and innovation on a broader scale than just the individual? And finally, just to point to some of the opportunities that we can gain from that. So just start off by looking at this idea of humanity. And this is a critical juncture in human history. It's the history of work on the planet as we've been replaced by machines. Most notably in the Industrial Revolution, when we started, all of the people creating cloth and clothes started getting replaced by machines. Now so many of the capabilities are being transcended. And as you probably heard, the computer Watson from IBM has won the quiz show Jeopardy in the United States. And it's a game based on wordplay and illusion. It's back in 1998 that in fact the chess grandmasters were first beaten by computers. Now we're moving to the day where gradually the capabilities which we believe and see to be human are in fact being overtaken by machines. Back a couple of centuries ago, this machine, the so-called Mechanical Turk, was wheeled around the courts of Europe, beating people at chess. And as you probably guessed, it wasn't the machinery that was doing the job. There was a genius chess-playing midget who was stuck in the little side of the machine on the side. So this name, Mechanical Turk, was taken up by Amazon to be able to describe how the man is in the machine. So we're building these distributed processes. Business processes now being laid out. So those that are best done by computers are done by computers. The other elements can be better done by humans. For example, recognizing which is the best framed photograph or the best sentence to describe something. These are things which humans are better at. So we're taking those modules and these elements to create this business process. But that in a way creates a point where the individuals are being made into elements in a machine. So this is the landscape on the future of work which I created recently. It's thinking, what is the future of work? We won't delve into that now. You can just find that by going to rossdawson.com or searching for future of work. But the key point there is this idea of labor displacement. So much of the work we have today is being moved out, displaced by crowdsourcing, work marketplaces, remote work, and where this idea of replacing workers with automation and robots and service, and using judgment increasingly to be able to do that. So what we have experienced today is that this whole management movement through the last century has really dehumanized work. You've put it into roles, into boxes. That's this whole idea of how do you manage an organization? So much of management science is about saying, this is a box, this is a role, this is something we will stick a human in to do that role. This has dehumanized work, and that has jeopardized our future. Because as we dehumanize work, we can replace it better with the machines, we can commoditize it, we can send it out around the world. We are using less of our capabilities as humans. So our future has to be in saying, how do we not just work out what humans are the very best at, what is our truest potential, but how can we truly tap the breadth of who we are in our work. We need to reconfigure work, not so that there are boxes and jobs and roles where individuals are put in and become commodities, but how can we really say what is possible for humans? What is the full scope of what we can do? The best of organizations of the future will be the ones that truly draw on all of the capabilities of their people, not just saying, this is your job description, this is your job role, do these 5 bullet points right and we'll pay you at the end of the year. Which brings us to crowds. So if we look at crowds, my very simple definition of crowdsourcing is tapping the minds of many. This is not about physical labor, it's about our minds. And there's many structures, many mechanisms whereby we can tap the minds of many people to create enormous value. So in my book, and again, you can just search for the crowdsourcing landscape or go to resultsfromcrowds.com, you can see this. Again, don't want to go into the details of this, but the reason I created this landscape of crowdsourcing is to show that there are 22 different categories that I identify. And I think, having considered a little bit more, I think there's a couple more which we need to draw out. So crowdsourcing is not just one thing, and I think probably everyone in the room recognizes this, but if we look at the broader community, many people see one thing like Kickstarter or graphic design logos and stuff, and they just see one thing and think this is all of what crowdsourcing is. But no, there's many ways in which we can tap the minds of many, including these ventures here. The Romans used to believe that we all had an individual genius, as represented in this statue, someone who inspired us, gave us their ideas. That's where the idea of genius comes from. So that is a uniquely human thing. This idea, this genius, the idea of a genius is somebody that dreams up things that other people can't, that has this unique insight. And I think it's very challenging. There's many things which are not best suited to crowds. But there is also the potential to be able to say, is there a way to catalyze group genius? To be able to have the vast insights and ideas and perspectives that are brought together to be able to create value, which is truly something we could think of genius, creating things which could not be thought of before. So we look at the world of creativity, it's instructive to look at some tests in the United States. So unfortunately we don't have tests for other countries, and it will be very interesting to see how this compared with Asia. This shows creativity in the United States over the last couple of decades. And they don't look like big downward trends, but they're actually pretty significant. Americans are becoming less creative, and in fact, when the tests were originally done in the 50s, they were far lower. So for a time from the 50s through to 1990, creativity was increasing. Now we're actually seeing creativity decrease in the United States. So this brings us some pretty deep issues to consider. But one of them is how can we bring many people together to catalyze higher levels of creativity and opportunity. Back in my book, Living Networks, I described this idea of the sexual life of ideas. And it's true that ideas come together and they procreate. Then all ideas, Arthur Koestler talked about bisociation, bringing two ideas to create a new one. And that's now, when we have this landscape, this flow of information ideas which is enabled by connectivity, ideas can flow and come together and create offspring in ways which were never possible before. So the breadth and scope of this flow of sexuality of ideas to create new mutations, new possibilities, is something which we're now living in. But it is about that connection. It is about bringing two things together to create something new and unpredictable, just as we can never know who our children will be when we get together. But again, if we look at this idea of creating creativity and innovation from connections, there's many studies being done around using social network analysis inside large organizations. This is a study of the social networks in one of the world's largest food organizations in their R&D labs, showing some of the segmentation. And part of what these analyses do is they bring out how can we better bring together different connections, different perspectives, different expertise to be able to create something that was not there before. And so the insights from the study were actually able to generate vastly more innovation in this organization. So if we think about some of the big trends, one of the biggest ones in the world at large today is that towards openness, as Sean was alluding to. We have open source, we have open government, we have open flows of information, we have transparency on all fronts. And this is clearly correlated to this idea of creativity. If we are closed, we can't create. It is only when we are open to other ideas that can come and intermingle and create something from that we have possibilities to grow. So the structure is the real nub of it. What are the structures by which we can enable that? The first thing to look at is, again, what is this distinction between what individuals can do best and what employees of an organization can do best and what crowds can do best? And they're still discovering some of those boundaries. And there's a number of constraints. The two most important on innovating in crowds are intellectual property and context. Now, those who have read my book know that I believe the case for intellectual property being a constraint on crowd innovation is vastly overstated. But you do still need to recognize that. There are some trade secrets, there is some confidentiality, there are some issues around protection which can be addressed. So it's not a necessarily important one, but is one which needs to be understood around what is done inside or outside organizations. But the context is in fact what's really important. You can't, if you have no context, the ideas and the creative innovation that you create is not able to be relevant. So if we look at some of the domains for innovation, starting at the easiest and going down to the hardest for how, what we can innovate depending on context. Products or services are not that context specific. You can create a new product, companies can take that up. Services, yes, there is a strategic context, but it's something you can go to the world at large. In terms of marketing or communication context, again, there's context required, but that's fairly easy to communicate. That's what a brief is to an agency, for example. Process. Now, if you're looking at business process innovation, this is actually one of the most important. If we're looking at how organizations can be more effective, more productive, more efficient, then absolutely process innovation is fundamental. This is very hard to put this out immediately to a crowd. You do need to provide some context. It can be done. But you do need to look for many. That's more likely to be inside organizations. Strategy or business model innovation, again, you require a lot of context on what is happening inside the organization. So as we'll come back to, the crowds can apply that, and they're more likely to employees. If we look at organizational structure, again, a massive domain for innovation, critical domain for innovation inside organizations. Again, this is something which the context required makes it a lot harder to go outside. So you do need to understand the context to be able to draw that. So if we look at some of these structures, one of the key domains is defined task. This is an outcome that we want. This is the task we want something out of that. And there's many platforms that provide that. So they say, okay, this is a task, we will throw this out, and we can get a whole world of people to be able to provide the best possible solution. So when you have a defined task, you are providing that context. Maybe a lot of context, you're requiring that to that. So the other space, if we're looking at creativity and innovation, is to be able to look at those things where we're bringing together many ideas to create things which are more emergent. You're not quite clear necessarily on what is being created or how that's being created, but there's many platforms where many people are coming together to develop ideas which build on each other's, developing context, developing insight. So these different structures and platforms to be able to divide this distributed idea development. And the other distinction to make is that around the strength of the relationship. Now, I believe that one of the most fundamental aspects of crowdsourcing is to finding the people which you can build strong relationships with. So my first book was developing knowledge-based client relationships. Knowledge and relationships come together. It's creating value in a relationship from deep mutual knowledge. And you can only have that in terms of relationship. So this idea of co-creation, we are co-creating value from unique ideas, unique perspectives, bring those together to create something which could not be created individually. So there's an external flow of relationships you can develop in this co-creation role is valuable, and the more you do it, the more value you can create. Yet there are indeed still ways which can be more point form and saying there's a very specific task, there's a very specific role, and bringing people into that. And one of the ways to be able to apply this is indeed inside participative strategy, being able to build strategy, not just the CEO, not just the board of directors, not just the strategy team, but across organizations. So General Electric's Workout, for example. We also have Morgan Stanley using scenario planning as a tool to be able to get participation to build strategy. One of Australia's largest financial organizations where it helped build a mechanisms where everybody could participate and contribute to the strategy. There's many ways to have this crowds generate the insights that will, and change it. As I said, business models and strategy are fundamental. If organizations are not changing and innovating their business models, they will simply get left behind. So if we look at some of the opportunities stemming from this, things that organizations need to do well. You need to be very good at defining the outcome you want, which is hopefully this is quite well done, but as you go to a broader external audience, that's far more important than it used to be inside. Assessing contribution. So all of these, many of the platforms I mentioned before around defining outcomes are contests. Now that's great until you get 1,000 contest entrants. And so you need to be very good at being able to assess contributions. There's a number of people around the world who are actually making a very good living running contests for other people. Yes, you've got great contest platforms, but you still need to be able to be good at and have the talent to be able to do that. Communicating context, as I've been providing. The more you can communicate the context, the better you are able to get value from this distributed crowd who doesn't necessarily have that context in them. Building these crowd mechanisms get richer and richer ways in which many people can together create value. We're still in this phase, and some of that has been created by people in this room, and also by the breadth of participation. Because there's only a narrow pool of people who are currently engaging in these crowd platforms or crowd mechanisms. The more people we can draw in, the more people we can attract to draw in through passion, through the right financial remuneration and so on, the more we can do from that. So if we look at, for example, agencies. Agencies are typically those who do creativity for a living. They sell creativity, they sell innovation. So one example of that is Victors and Spoils in the United States. They brand themselves as the first crowdsourced ad agency. And they doing this work, for example, this ad for Harley Davidson. We've got many other big name clients. And they've got Harley Davidson by basically saying to the director of marketing, we've got an idea to be able to how to create this, draw ideas from the crowd. Through that process, they were then able to create this ad which they won. So they're now part of the Havas group. There's more and more agencies which are then saying, all right, well, if our job is to be creative and innovative, we need to be able to be good at those structures ourselves. And then if we go on to look at organizations and clients, there's two domains. Currently, we have these bounded networks where they draw on people internally and try to get better connected, as I referred to in that innovation space. Now organizations, I mean, to Sean's point around tapping the best people in the world, who will, by definition, be outside your organization, and able to go to these unbounded networks, to be able for all corporations themselves to get more skilled at the mechanisms, the structures, the context, the flows that can draw the most talented to be involved. So the potential and the promise, coming back to where we started, is that of truly creating this global brain, being able to create the mechanisms, the structures, the platforms whereby the future of creativity and innovation is not just drawing the best from all of us as individuals, but drawing something which is beyond what we can create today. So if we look at this flow, looking at humanity, and I think we need to start with who we are as humans and how we will continue to create a rich and prosperous future for ourselves. The nature of crowds, the nature of creativity, particularly the structures that are critical to create that, and the opportunities beyond that. And I believe we are truly at the dawn of a new era, and I invite you and your organizations to create the future of creativity and innovation. Thank you.